I am here today at 39 weeks pregnant, and I have been getting a lot of questions about birth plans and birth preferences sheets. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what a birth plan is, how I've worked on preparing mine and making it into kind of a living, breathing, active, working vision. And then also share a couple of tips on mistakes sometimes expecting moms or couples will make when they create their own birth plan or preference sheet. And if you're like, what is a birth plan anyways? Let me just quickly start by sharing that a birth plan or preferences sheet essentially is a document that expecting mama or a couple will create on their own or with the support of their doula or support team in the later part of the third trimester. And it's a document that outlines their vision for what they hope or intend for the birth, as well as lists out their boundaries or the things that they want to make sure that their care provider is on board with in terms of what they hope won't happen. This becomes extremely important, especially if you are birthing in a hospital setting where there tends to be a much higher emphasis on medical intervention, and statistically rates of interventions, certain pressures for having a birth done in a certain time can happen. When I'm working with my clients as a health coach and doula, I really emphasize how important it is to create this type of document for two reasons. First, for the benefit of the care provider and the couple to get in alignment on what they envision for the birth, and also so that the expecting mama is really clear on what the care provider is able to do or is on board with. For example, making a birth plan or preferences sheet in advance and then talking it out with the care provider will inform the expecting mom. If the care provider is okay with her doing non-traditional pushing positions, or if she's able to move around during labor, or if the care provider has a very tight timeline on how soon labor has to start before or after a due date, etc. The other benefit of a birth plan or preferences sheet is that it allows for the expecting mom or family to really invest time and energy in envisioning different possibilities and also getting comfortable with a whole range of scenarios. So what can happen, and I have a little cheat sheet with me, so if I'm referring to my notes, that's why I'm not looking at you. A couple of mistakes that expecting mamas can make when creating their birth preferences sheet is to really focus on what she doesn't want. No medical intervention, no Pitocin, don't give the vitamin K shot, don't direct me when I'm pushing, a lot of no's. And the focus with that is really putting the mom on the defense, on guard. Now, it's not without reason that many expecting moms will go into a birth preferences kind of workshop or creation experience with that mindset, because especially if you're having the intention of a more low intervention or more natural birth, you probably have done some reading and research about induction rates or about cesarean rates, or you are aware that as soon as one intervention happens, it increases the likelihood of other things kind of snowballing. So kind of going into the hospital or wherever you're giving birth, but most likely hospital, as that's where most take place, especially in the States, being on guard is kind of natural. It's kind of like, if I'm not protecting and advocating for myself, then who's going to? And that's especially true for women and families of color, where there's statistically higher challenges around birth and statistically higher interventions from the get-go. The thing is, being in fear mode, being in defense mode, being on guard is totally counter to the flow of all of the positive and happy hormones that get labor started and allow for it to progress. So when labor is kicking off and we're getting into the flow, that's when we're having higher levels of oxytocin. And you may have heard this analogy, but it's true. When a female animal, a pregnant animal, goes into labor, and if she senses there's a predator nearby, her labor will literally stop because she wants to wait until it's safe. So starting a birth preferences document or going into the birth with a lot of fear of this could happen, that could happen, I got to make sure this is a no, don't do this, don't do that, stay away, get away. That is kind of just setting up for perhaps stress or a non-optimal mind and heart state to be in. Another mistake that I see a lot when I'm working with couples or moms who show me a birth plan is that there is a tendency to maybe not focus on thinking about or talking about the scenarios that maybe there's like some deep fear around. So for example, or a strong preference for something to not happen. So for example, I was working with a couple who, the woman, she had a very strong concern that she was going to end up having a cesarean birth, a C-section, as it's called commonly. And as a result, her birth preferences sheet was entirely about that the things kind of leading up to the cesarean that she wanted to make sure didn't happen, so that the cesarean wouldn't even take place. But she didn't include any details on how she would want things to go in the event of a cesarean birth. Can she, have a more gentle cesarean birth, or is it possible to do skin to skin right after the procedure? And she also never had no desire to go to see where the OR was, or to even try to picture what it might be like if that's the direction the birth went in. There's a lot of resistance. Now, I get that. I mean, I really understand why it doesn't make sense. Like, if I don't want to have a medical birth, why would I go and look in the medical part? At the same time, not having a plan B can leave a mom in labor in a position that is just not optimal. So using the experience of creating a birth preferences sheet in advance allows for a safe space, a low stakes environment to play out different scenarios and just to test out, what are my thoughts on this? What might I feel if this were to happen? Or how might I optimize if I'm going down a path that is necessary, if not preferable? And finally, the third mistake that I wanted to presence when an expecting mama or couple makes a birth plan is that they write it out, or they fill in a template and then they just leave it be until the birthday. They do it and then they let it go. And what I want to really emphasize, and what I'm going to share a little bit more about today, is that a birth preferences sheet is a living, active, breathing document. It needs to be visited and even practiced and envisioned. So when you are actually in the experience, it doesn't feel new or unfamiliar, even if it's your first time giving birth and you don't exactly know what a contraction is going to feel like, or exactly what to expect. Now, this is something that can be kind of brought to life after it's initially created through conversation, talking out what your preferences are for your birth with your partner or your care provider, or your doula or your sisters. And ideally, if you're sharing it with anyone who's not a professional support, especially someone who's given birth themselves or who's had an experience, to preface the sharing by saying, this is what I want. And if you have advice or your own experience, please just ask me before interjecting, because sometimes we can be influenced in ways that take us out of our own bodies. With my doula for this pregnancy, again, I'm 39 weeks, so the baby's going to come any day now, I think. That's what my body's at least telling me. With my doula, she had us actually go through, after the birth preferences sheet was made, she had us go through and do like a practice labor. So I not just visualized, I actually got into the position that I envisioned laboring in. And my husband, Warren, was right there with me doing the breaths that I envisioned doing. And we kind of did this little like kind of a micro role play. And even now, thinking back to that experience, I feel as though my preferences are so much more in my body and out of my head. And that's where we want to be during labor. Now, this isn't about locking us into a certain outcome. In fact, the reason why I use the term birth preferences sheet instead of birth plan is because there's no way that we can totally predict or plan for what's going to happen in our births. This is a co-creative experience. I can want a certain way of this little baby coming, but he also has his own vision. There's a lot of different factors at play. And so even though we are going to be using this document as an active living document and envisioning or even practicing, we also get to release attachment to the outcome, having it look exactly this way. And that's really something major, and it's something that requires practice. Okay, so I have my plan for my baby with me, and I want to share the 5 steps that I go through when I'm working with expecting families, and also that I went through myself for making a birth preferences sheet. Are you ready? Now, feel free to take any notes now, or if you are currently pregnant, you can start to kind of go into it as we go through this. If you are, more of someone that works with their hands, writing on paper is definitely preferable, but you can always type things out too, so you can make quick changes. Okay, so step number 1 for making a birth preferences sheet is to go into a relaxed place and state that you feel safe and comfortable, and start with envisioning your birth. This process should take anywhere from 10 to even 30 minutes, but giving yourself a little bit of time just to eyes closed, breathing deeply, really see the birth unfolding before your eyes. So we're starting with a vision, picturing either this playing out as if you're watching a movie, or as if you're flipping through a photo album and you're seeing snapshots, and really focusing on that deep breathing and staying in your body allows you to feel the vision for your birth. Now, you might do this visioning and then go and write out everything that you saw and felt. Or if you are someone that prefers to kind of in real time narrate, I love to recommend the transcription free app called Otter, like the animal, OTTER.ai. And you can speak out loud and have the app record what you're saying. So with your eyes closed, you're seeing it's early in the morning, I'm laying in bed, I start to feel surges or contractions. I go in and start to use my breath. I see the light coming through the window as time passes. I'm relaxing, going on and on. And really getting as clear with as many visuals or using all of your senses. Like I'm sipping on ginger tea and it feels so refreshing as it goes down my throat, like really letting yourself get in the experience. And then once that's complete, then either writing it down or having it transcribed and reviewing it. From there, you can take your vision and then start to break it down into different parts. So one way that I really love and have seen a lot of kind of feelings of clarity around is to break the birth preferences sheet down into the different stages of labor. The first stage, which is active labor. Second stage, pushing. Third stage, the birthing of the placenta. And then early postpartum mama and baby care. So that's the way that I've done it for my birth preferences sheet. And this is the way that, again, I've seen a lot of really great examples of couples benefiting from that, because at each point there can kind of be a check-in. And you can also do it based on topics. So for example, timing, that's where you might talk about, I prefer to have a natural start to labor instead of any medical induction up until 42 weeks. I prefer to allow for labor to progress on its own timeline without XYZ, or other topics like laboring or how the baby can be treated after birth, etc. So you can do it based on topic, or you can just kind of list everything out and then deal with organization later. But I do really love having some kind of structure so it can be referred to really easily in real time. And one thing that I always love to include is at the bottom of the sheet, just kind of having an asterisk, a permission slip for the expecting mama that you reserve the right to change your mind. So at any point in time, these preferences may change and that's okay. But as they are right now, those are the kind of steps based on the vision. And I speak to that especially around things like pain relief or timing, because especially in the case of a mama that feels very strongly about not having, for example, an epidural, especially for first-time mamas, like who feel very attached and like, I'm a kind of mom that's going to do it without that. Well, at a certain point, if labor's been going on for 36 or 48 hours, or there hasn't been any rest, or contractions or surges are happening really, really quickly, like you might change your mind, and that's okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And there's no stain on your motherhood or your birth experience. And so giving yourself the permission slip of you can change your mind at any time is always an important one to kind of have in your energetic field as you're making this sheet and really thinking about what you want and what you would prefer to not have happen. Okay, so once that kind of stage by stage or topic by topic breakdown has happened, and you can add things in as you go, then we can start to look at how the language is actually written out. So my recommendation, to the best of your ability, is to keep the language in a positive tone. So for example, having a sheet that's like, no this, no that, no this, no that, no vitamin K shot, no Pitocin, no blah, 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 blah. That again brings you back into that state of like fear and defense and being on guard. Instead, there's an opportunity to shift that into, I will ask for pain relief medication if I want it. I prefer the baby has an hour with me at least for the golden hour before any sort of care is given. Like really making it into what you want instead of what you don't want. The only exception is you may make a supplemental kind of cheat sheet of sorts that you have with you if you're having a hospital birth. Now, I say this because although the no's shouldn't be all over the sheet that you're working with and in the 3rd trimester, visioning and bringing to the hospital with you, it may be helpful for the labor and delivery nurses or for the medical team just to have it really simply and clearly laid out. I can't tell you how many women that I know and have worked with who they get to the hospital and they have this vision for no pain relief or medical pain relief, or no, there's plenty of non-medical pain relief, or no medical induction measures like the use of the balloon or the Pitocin. And many of the, not always, but in some hospitals, the MO is like, let's get this moving. Let's offer the pain relief, because statistically, most women do take an epidural. And so nurses might be either with good intentions or maybe with the impatience of like, let's stay on a schedule, be coming in on the regular saying, hey, are you ready for your epidural yet? Hey, do you want this? Hey, now it's time for that. Hey, it's been a little while. Like, let's talk about XYZ intervention. And it can be really distracting to the mom if she's in labor, and also can be a little bit disheartening. It's like, leave me alone. So if you're already printing out your birth preferences sheet, and of course your OB has it or your midwives have it, also printing out copies that can be posted in most hospital rooms and laboring rooms. There's like a whiteboard where the nurses will make notes and update so that as shift changes happen, everyone's kind of on the same page, and posting it with some tape right next to that in a very visible place can be really helpful. Okay, step number 4. Whew, working through this. So step number 4 is once the words have been decided, and this is something that a mama can do on her own, but it's even better if she's doing it in kind of a somewhat co-creative capacity with her support team. So when I'm working with a mama, I'm here as her doula and as support to offer questions or to clarify what she's thinking or feeling. And that can, or to offer like, hey, have you thought about this? Or, hey, what if this situation happens? And that can be super helpful. And it's also great to have whoever is going to be with you at the birth on board. So when I was making my sheet with my doula, my husband Warren was also there. And so if I was saying, hey, I really want to be in the water for a lot of labor, and then Warren's like, well, okay, then where am I? Like, what's my role? And he can start to really feel into that. So step 4 is, as this sheet is created and everyone's feeling good about the document, and then ideally the document also is discussed with your care provider, just to make sure that there is alignment, because sometimes you might go to the care provider and say, I want total freedom of movement and intermittent monitoring, and I want to push on my all fours and standing up and hanging from a rope. And the care provider's like, we don't do that. The hospital policy is this. I've never caught a baby in that position, and the hospital requires that you have your continuous monitoring, or blah, 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 blah. That changes the document. And the circumstances being different doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a bad thing, but it means that you got to kind of account for that, right? Okay, so the words that are feeling good, now we get to commit to practicing while also letting go of the outcome. Practicing looks like visualizing before you go to bed at night, seeing that plan or preferences sheet kind of happening, unfolding before your eyes. Maybe if the sheet is printed out, you are reading, you're posting it on your bathroom mirror, and you're kind of envisioning it when you're brushing your teeth or going to the bathroom. It's really not too different than creating a vision board for like your business dreams or your dream relationship or an upcoming vacation. you can envision it and be intentional, but ultimately this is the co-creative experience. And so staying relaxed, but really seeing these different parts happening before your eyes. And that can be aided by making the birth preferences sheet visually very attractive and clear and appealing. So, and yeah, okay. So that's kind of the bonus step 5, which would be to take the birth preferences and find ways of making the design of what you're writing beautiful and inspiring and kind of smile inducing. So it might be something, I'm not very talented when it comes to design. So I used a Canva template and added in some images that I thought were kind of fun. But when I work with mamas who are like in the tech or design world, they might make different icons or put images or use different fonts in ways that are really beautiful, and have a birth preferences sheet or birth plan that has a lot of visual intention and beauty to it. Now if that's not in your style or you don't feel cool about that, like that's totally fine. You can literally have a Word document or a handwritten journal page as your birth preferences sheet. But I do have to say that having that extra time and intention going into kind of the beautifying of the vision is both kind of a nice energetic symbol to you of the intention that you're putting into your birth, but then also can, in some cases, allow for the care provider to take it more seriously. Because it's like, all right, this is very important to this mama. So I'm gonna make sure that it's read through or to the best of my ability, honored. Print out multiple copies, make sure that anyone on your care team has a copy, and then bring extra with you when you end up going to the hospital. That's super important. And yeah, and have fun with it. So I'm going to just quickly walk you through my birth preferences sheet. And it can be helpful to look at other samples, which are abundantly all over Instagram and Google. So you can look at the way that different mamas have written out or designed their sheets. But I want to share mine because actually it's part of my process of speaking aloud my intentions. And also because it can be helpful to say, oh, I hadn't thought about that, or, oh, I didn't know that that was even a possibility. So, so for me, with my birth preferences for this baby, my real intention is for a calm and peaceful, low intervention vaginal birth in the water. And the circumstances that I'll be in, which is context for how and why I wrote what I did, is that I will be laboring during early labor at home in our beautiful work in progress apartment in Valencia that luckily has a bathtub and a shower and a birth ball, and thanks to our doula, a loaned rebozo, which is a special kind of scarf blanket that can be used for comfort measures. And then when labor progresses to the point of being ready to go to our birthing space, we will be going over to a special birthing suite, which is kind of like a mini birth center located within one of the hospitals here in Valencia. So I'm working with a team through this amazing place called Clinica Park Central. It's an OB-run operation who works very closely with an amazing midwife and also certain other colleagues. So I'll be working with both my midwife as well as my OB in this birthing suite that has a huge birthing jacuzzi, as well as kind of like a curtain you can use for hanging, a birth stool, a birth ball. No shower in the suite, which is important to note for the way that I wrote my plan. And then a bed that has all sorts of like bars and you can move it and change it. And there's also aromatherapy and multiple different light settings. So I'm working with that kind of environment. Okay. And in this birthing suite, there is the option for pain relief is nitrous oxide gas. There is no epidural that's given in this birthing suite, and there's no continuous monitoring. But in other rooms of the hospital, there is continuous monitoring. And if you don't know what that is, that basically means that when you get into the hospital, continuous monitoring, which is the standard practice at many hospitals, unless there's a gift or a miracle or an exception, a kind of a belly belt is kind of strapped onto you and you're hooked up to a machine that is constantly reading the baby's heart rate and your heart rate. So it can be great for tracking that if that's an important factor based on you or the baby's health. However, it also can restrict freedom of movement, meaning the ability to walk around, to move freely, to get into the water. So for me, that's not kind of a concern, unless for some reason my birthing suite is taken by another mama, in which case I'll be going to a kind of classic room in that hospital. So the considerations are different. Okay, so after doing my visioning with Warren and guided by my doula, after checking in with my care team, with my OB and midwife about what the preferences that we wrote out that were all in alignment. And then after breaking it up into each stage of labor, the birth preferences that I have going into my birth starting with the first stage of birth, which is active labor. I envision total freedom of movement. So without the continuous monitoring and without any epidural, which also kind of puts someone in a position of not being able to move physically their body because they can't feel their body or because the hospital regulations prevent any movement at all. So freedom of movement, I want to walk, I want to dance, I want to step on some stairs, I want to move my hips, sit on a birth ball, change positions a lot. That's what I'm totally seeing. And my intention is to do so without any medical pain relief. So in this case, I don't even need to worry about being offered an epidural because it's not in that room. But what I did write on my preferences sheet was that I will ask for any sort of pain relief if I want it, like leave it to me. That's all. I also am very aware that during birth, there is this heightened sense of the importance of environment for making a woman, for me to feel safe. So again, we are going to be in a hospital, although it's in a kind of separate little area, but I request soft talking anytime someone comes in to check me, very quiet steps, very kind of gentle and slow movements. Even the tone change in my voice just now, I'm really envisioning that anyone who's coming in is doing so very quietly, as if they are, entering a sacred space, which is what it is. And when I'm at home as well, there's soft music playing in the background. I've made a labor playlist that's kind of like yoga and angel songs. And so the environment is very calm, leading into that intention of a very peaceful birth. I also request that the hypnobirthing vocabulary is respected. So instead of my midwife coming in and saying, oh, when was your last contraction? I'm using the word surge. And this is something that I don't have to luckily educate my care team about or what that means or have like a vocabulary cheat sheet because they're familiar with it already. But that's something that's important to me. And I also am requesting access throughout labor to food and drinks. Now, when I'm laboring at home, that means that my husband, Warren, will remind me, hey, do you want some coconut water? How about some bone broth? Hey, let's eat a medjool date. There are foods that I've already listed out and prepared actually, or have packaged, just one second, or have prepackaged that are ready to be enjoyed. I request access to water. So at home, I have my shower. And if I end up in a normal hospital room, I'll also have the shower, which is one of my favorite go-to measures for pain relief and for kind of soothing discomfort, especially during surges. And then in the birthing suite, access to the labor tub. So I hope and plan to spend a lot of time in the tub. That's what I did with my first birth, and it felt amazing. I really feel the personal benefits. And then there's also a lot of data that shows the benefits of being in a tub, both for everything ranging from the progression of labor, although for not too long in the tub, but also for the reduction of the potential for any sort of tearing. And then I also request for, in the event of being in a normal hospital room, intermittent monitoring, but again, my OB is already on board with that. And then limited vaginal checks. So only if they're medically necessary, and especially limited if the water has broken already, if the membranes have been ruptured. And the last thing during that labor stage is that I request to allow for the waters to rupture or break naturally. So sometimes hospitals will offer a manual kind of breaking of the waters if they haven't done so already. And that's something I prefer not to happen. Okay, so second stage, which is pushing. My preference is to birth in the water, to be in this beautiful jacuzzi tub and to be with the kind of the support or surrounding of my husband and my doula. However, besides that, to really just be kind of left for us to do our thing. That same calm, gentle environment is super important. So dark, kind of soft lighting, yoga angel music, calm voices, not really any talking, and the freedom to try different positions. If I'm not in the tub, that's also okay. Like that's what ended up happening with my first birth with Lila. I was in the tub for a lot of the labor and even for some of the pushing, the first attempt at a push at least. But when it came time to push and to do the thing, I happened just to be by the bed, so I ended up birthing on the bed, and it ended up being great. But wherever I am, I definitely want to try different positions. So getting on hands and knees, maybe using the ball, maybe using the birthing kind of curtain, kind of hanging, using gravity, squatting, just like seeing what feels good in the moment, maybe lying on my side of the peanut ball. Like, I don't know, but I do know, and I'm practicing all these different positions, but I do know I want to have access to trying different things. And I do not intend to birth while lying on my back in the very classic kind of cinematography Hollywood version of what birth looks like. I also have the preference to not have a time limit to pushing, unless for some reason it's medically necessary to move things along. I request a pushing experience that is free from any sort of intervention, like the use of forceps, a vacuum, episiotomy. Again, that's like when I said that, my OB laughed. She was like, I really wouldn't want to do that either, which is different than other OBs. But I mean, in my case, I feel very lucky that we're aligned on that. But having warm compress on my perineum during pushing is something that I would love to have if that's possible, as well as some very gentle guidance on pushing, especially when the ring of fire happens, basically when the baby is crowning. So a reminder to breathe and not to push, to allow for the stretching of the perineum, which can minimize the potential for tearing. But I don't envision being coached, like barked at like a football coach, like push, like no, none of that. We're going to be in like a calm and quiet environment. After the baby comes, move to the third stage. The birth's not over because I still get to birth the placenta. And so during this stage, my preferences are that we wait to cut the cord until it stops pulsating. And that's really allowing for multiple minutes to go by. So all of the blood transfer from the placenta through the umbilical cord is given to the baby, which has a crazy number of health benefits for the baby. So just waiting a little bit. Again, that was something that my care provider was like, we were going to do that anyways. But a lot of the time there's this strange urgency, like the OB or the care team will be like, okay, baby's out, cut the cord, dad. And it happens really fast. And as a result, there's this lost opportunity for that transfusion of blood and nutrients, etc. I have no preference on who cuts the cord. If Warren wants to do it in the moment, go ahead. If the nurse does it because that's what makes sense, like that's fine. However, I do really hope that the baby can be immediately placed on my chest for immediate skin-to-skin contact, for the breast crawl to happen, and if possible, to allow for the time and the natural birthing of the placenta. Sometimes care teams will immediately go into doing a very intense fundal massage to try to get the placenta out, or will give the new mama a shot of Pitocin to try to get the placenta to expel, or there'll be like a time crunch around that. But unless there's any indication of like a medical challenge or emergency, my preference is just to let it come as it comes. And to also save the placenta so I can take it home, because I do plan to do a ceremony in postpartum with the placenta. So I'll just bring a cooler bag and keep it in the freezer until I go ahead and do that. Also very important, I'm gonna have to sign like a release record. Hospitals sometimes get funky about placenta. It's technically considered medical waste in hospitals. So I already got my doctor on board with that. And actually, it's very cool. The midwife that will be supporting us, when I was telling her this, she was like, by the way, I also do placenta prints, which is basically taking the placenta and adding a natural kind of dye and then actually placing it on a piece of paper to have a print. And because of the vein structure of the placenta, it's actually super cool. It kind of has this resemblance of the tree of life. It's very beautiful. So I was like, oh my gosh, let's do a print. That's so fun. That's so cool. For my first birth, I encapsulated my placenta and took it basically as like a vitamin during my postpartum recovery. Since doing subsequent research for my book, I've found that it may not be necessarily the best choice for me. That was a big like change of perspective for me personally. So I'm not going to get it encapsulated and ingest it myself this time, but that's something that some moms choose to do. More on that another day. And then finally in postpartum, or not finally, actually, in postpartum, after the placenta is birthed, my next section is, early postpartum baby and mama care for my birth preferences sheet. So some of the things that I'm requesting and that I'm envisioning is that any exams, besides of course like the weight or the height, are done well on my chest, and to delay any non-urgent necessary procedures or exams until after that golden hour. So at least until I can have an hour or more if possible with me and the baby, doing skin to skin on the chest. I also have the intention of breastfeeding. We're very, very hopeful and optimistic about that. And so allowing for that time and for the establishing of a latch and just like see how that goes. I have the intention and the preference for my baby to remain with us as much as humanly possible, again, unless there's some medical emergency, and that there's no wiping off of the baby. Oftentimes babies are born with this kind of, it looks like a white sticky coating of lotion of almost, but it's called vernix. And it's actually great for protecting and moisturizing the baby's skin. So no need for a bath, no need for wiping the baby off, just wrap him up or just put him on my chest and like, we're good to go. And then my preference is also for the vitamin K shot instead of the multiple oral solution. Babies, just for the protection of any like need for blood clotting. And then I asked yes to the eye ointment as well. In some hospitals or some states, it's mandatory, so you don't even have a choice. But in Spain, there is the choice. So after doing some evidence-based research, Warren and I feel like, yes, let's do it. However, we're delaying the hepatitis B vaccination. And then I also have a preference of breast milk only, no other outside anything. So no formula, no pacifier, unless, in the case of formula, unless it's like medically necessary. And then this time, I've also included a section for my preferences in the event of a cesarean birth. And this is actually something that a couple of years ago, I wasn't offering or doing with other clients. I didn't do it for my first birth. And I'm really glad that I gave myself this chance to talk out and to think out what I would want in the event of a medical birth, in the event of a cesarean birth. So I was able to talk out with my care provider about how she shows up and does it. And my preferences for this are that it's considered it's a gentle birth, which often it's a kind of a newer category of cesarean births, where the room is typically quite quiet, the OR, so people aren't talking about their vacations or what they did last night or what they ate for breakfast. Sometimes there's a clear sheet so the mom can see what's going on, or the baby's held up after he's delivered through the surgery so that the mom can see him. Certain elements that maybe if the woman wants, she's talked through what's happening, so she's kept up to date, or her partner or birth partner or doula are in the room with her. She's not strapped down. Like there's certain things that can be done if the OB is on board and if that's something that's expressed. So for me, yes, gentle cesarean, all the measures that are possible, that both Warren and our doula are in the room with me. And then when the baby does need to be taken, if the baby does need to be taken away right away, that Warren will go with him and my doula will stay with me. I request a calm and quiet environment for reflection and prayer. And a tip, if you do want that quiet environment in your OR, but you're not getting that respect, you can kind of have your doula or your partner or yourself, you can just say, I'd like the room quiet for prayer. And typically when there's religion involved, or for better or for worse, like that's typically one of the more heard or respected requests, instead of like, I just prefer to be quiet. And then, yeah, I request that my OB keeps me updated on what's happening. And even if it's for a short little bit, that the baby can be held up to my face and neck. I'll be kind of covered up here, so it wouldn't be a full skin to skin chest experience, but like, just like, hello, I want to say hello and meet the baby, if possible. And then, yeah, that's kind of it. Those are the preferences that I've talked about and envisioned and gone through, and I'm actively practicing. I'm so curious how you're feeling if you're listening to this and thinking about your birth. Every birth preferences sheet is totally different, and with the different moms that I know and I've worked with, like there's a whole spectrum, whether you're having a scheduled cesarean for any reason, whether you are so ready for all of the pain relief, whether you are hoping to howl at the moon in the woods, like whatever it is, there's no right or wrong way. And that's super important to remember, that every birth is unique, and what feels right and good for you is right and good for you. So that's also why when I mentioned earlier, if you're sharing your birth preferences, just to preface with whoever you're talking to, if you want feedback or not, or if you want opinions or experience or not, because you don't need to be influenced. Like you can be good with what you want. Okay, so this ended up being a much longer live than I expected, but I'm so happy to share this, and I hope that it's helpful and valuable for you. And any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And I wish you or whoever in your life is giving birth a smooth and joyful and wonderful, love-filled experience, however you envision it. And thanks for taking the time to tune in. So goodbye for now.